They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. We are so happy to have you. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
And one of the reasons we started this podcast, full disclosure, is that Katie and I have had our own political awakenings at different times in our lives. And we realized that it is important to get involved and to do our part. And I keep saying over and over again, Katie, and I'm going to continue to say it, that we have to be active participants in the process, because standing on the sidelines, sitting on the sidelines, hiding out is not working for us. And we are in serious risk of losing the country that we love. And so whenever there's a story that comes out, or a person that has kind of found their political awakening or their moment to get involved, I always love to talk about it. But today it's a little different. I live in California, and there have been a series of stories that just sort of hit me in the face about people actually standing up and doing something when the government has failed them. And how is the crime issue in Virginia? You live in Virginia. Is crime as terrible as it is here in California? Do you feel it getting worse?
Oh, yes. Well, I will say I feel it very personally because our house was broken into a year ago, December. Thankfully, we were all out of the house at that moment, but not for long. And our 24-year-old son came into the house to realize somebody had broken into his bedroom, trampled all over his bed, and it was terrifying. Of course, the police descended, and they believe that our two big dogs, our Belgian Shepherds, who we love, chased them out, which is really a blessing. But no, we have huge problems, and it's a combination of our Soros-funded district attorney. Then we have the other problem is we are not hiring enough police officers. So when I last looked, Fairfax County had 30% of its police positions unfilled, right? And then we have additionally the huge problem of Fairfax being a sanctuary city, but also Washington, D.C. is seeing a huge jump in crime, and it's affecting members of Congress who've been attacked and staffers who've been attacked. And you figure at some point, eventually they're going to wake up and say enough is enough, but it hasn't happened yet.
It's really interesting because there is a whole combination of problems that I think we can all identify with. Everything you just said, I find myself sitting here shaking my head. It's the Soros-funded DAs that are the problem in California, but it even goes beyond that, because we have an out of control legislature that has passed a lot of laws making it easier for people to commit crimes and almost creating a sense of lawlessness. And I would say even prioritizing the criminal rather than the victim in many of these cases, because these criminals, and I'll use air quotes here, these criminals are victims of the system. That's what the Democrats in California would argue, and that we need to treat them with the gentle hand. There's been a huge push to open up our prisons, let people that were incarcerated out. Really, without law and order, there is no society. And that's what I'm feeling like in LA. I'm in my 40s. I grew up in Los Angeles. I've lived there my whole life. And truly, I don't think that I've ever felt less safe. And I've lived in LA through the riots, through all of the racial divides that happened in the 90s with that actually resulted in the O.J. Simpson verdict. I mean, all of these things I've been through, and LA started to get better. And now it's getting worse again because of the culmination of all of this. And then you add in the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, and you force vaccinations on our police department. And as you mentioned, our LA Sheriff's Department, our LAPD, most local law enforcement organizations are totally not at capacity. And by the way, they're not hiring the best and brightest because people aren't wanting to go into that profession anymore because they feel that they're really, they've got their hands tied. You know, there's no support for the police in a very blue state like California. And so what we've seen is just a complete failure. And just kind of an anecdotal story. I was hosting my morning show yesterday, and one of our regular callers, who's a great guy, he's actually a business owner. He owns a place. I think it's called the Blue Dog Tavern or something like that on Ventura Boulevard. His name is Paul Scrivano. He's from Sherman Oaks. He's been on Fox News several times talking about the crime situation. And he sent me a video of his surveillance. This is how brazen these criminals are now. It's broad daylight, middle of the day. He was in his bathroom. He walks out of his bathroom and he goes outside to the what I assume was the parking lot. You see a guy walk into the store, rifle through some stuff, take a bag full of tools, which he said was probably worth about $1,000. He goes into the bathroom. My listener comes back through the store, walks in, grabs something, walks out again. The guy comes out of the bathroom, and in his hands is a puppy. He stole a puppy from someone, shoved it in his backpack, took it into the bathroom, put the tools inside of his backpack, and held the puppy and walked right out like he was just, Mr. Nice Guy with a puppy in his arms. These are the kind of people that just walk in while people are in their own establishments, whether it's their home or their business, and take stuff. And because of a Proposition 47, which we'll talk about, if it's under $950 in value, they're not even going to get arrested. It's like a ticket. It's basically a citation. And that's created this huge, huge bump in burglaries, in robberies, and in all of these smash and grabs that have been happening at shopping malls and really impacting the business environment around here.
Well, I was struck by this story about Goldie Hawn saying, this just came out in Breitbart, saying their house has been broken into twice and she is never without a security guard. Well, lucky her that she can afford to have a security guard all the time. But I think about all the normal people who can't and what it's like to live with that stress and insecurity. And, I just remember my sister, lived in Los Angeles. She was in Pacific Palisades for years. And I remember, from time to time, I'd be on the phone with her and she would say, oh, here come the helicopters, right? Because if they're like trying to chase somebody, they'd come in with the police helicopters. And it just always freaked her out. So she is long gone. And it sounds like not just Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, but it sounds like lots of, big names have left or are leaving because it's not safe anymore.
Yeah. You've got a lot of people. I just saw a headline today. Jillian Michaels, the trainer from The Biggest Loser, she's done. She left California. Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell say they're getting ready to leave. They don't feel safe. And they're the ones who have the real protection. So the good news here is that a group of citizens have gotten together in a couple of different ways. We'll talk about Prop 47 in a second. You may have heard the story. Did you hear about Johnny Wachter? He was the General Hospital actor. He was a soap star.
I think everybody heard that. That was just so sad and tragic. Absolutely. Yep.
So if you missed it, he was an actor on General Hospital. He also had a job at a bar in downtown Los Angeles, and he was leaving with a coworker of his. They were walking to their car in a public parking lot. They see three guys who are bending around the car. At first, they thought they were being towed or something, and then he walks over and he says, with his hands up, "Hey, what's going on here? That's my car." Well, they were stealing or trying to steal his catalytic converter, and there's such a no respect for human life that when he approached them, apparently he stepped in front of the woman that he was with, stepped in front of her, put his hands up, showing he wasn't going to hurt anybody, but just what's going on. And the guys turned around and shot him, and he died right there on the street. His family, and not that there is any silver lining to a story like that, because this poor family has been suffering. It's been 3 weeks, but they haven't been able to catch a suspect. And so I think they've been doing the bravest thing, and they decided to use his story to try to make real change in California. And so they've been putting the pressure on the LA DA's office to try to offer a reward, to try to get information, to get justice on these suspects who killed Johnny Wachter. And then this week, they also coordinated a march from the place where he was shot and killed to City Hall to demand justice for him. And that story struck me because this is so fresh and new for them. They just lost someone that they love. I mean, it's his mother, his father, his family, and it's only been 3 weeks. But they're using this, I think, for positive that actually might change the life of someone else. Maybe their work and them putting pressure, and because he was a public he had a public persona and he was a celebrity, maybe this is going to put a little bit of pressure on the DA's office. And I think it's a really brave thing when something bad happens to you, that you let that kind of work to, I guess it inspires you to help other people. And I really feel like this is a good story of a family taking action that could benefit all of Los Angeles because of the pressure that they're now putting on the DA's office. And it's getting picked up on a lot of local news outlets. It was the front page of the Los Angeles Daily News today. And this is the kind of stuff that we can do as average people to put the pressure on our elected officials who are failing us in this department.
Well, particularly in light of this story, which did make national news, I find it so utterly tone deaf that your governor, Gavin Newsom, has proposed slashing budgets for public safety. He's saying he's going to, they're talking about $97 million cut to trial court operations, a $10 million cut to the Department of Justice's Division of Law Enforcement, and more than $80 million in cuts to the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Now, here's what I find so utterly ironic and absurd. Yeah. They're saying that they have to do this because they are facing a $27 billion deficit. But then down in the article, you see this little line. Yep. Nonetheless, Newsom proposed shifting money from the general fund, offering $1.7 billion for climate goals, particularly those related to equity programs. So I'm sorry, I don't think they've got a budget shortfall. I think they want to be funding other things that advance their radical progressive agenda. And it's everyday citizens who are going to suffer because of it.
What's interesting in California, and by the way, this is one thing we get right. We actually have a law in the books that says you have to have a balanced budget. Could you imagine if that were to happen across the country? I mean, that would be pretty nice. But we're supposed to have a balanced budget. And Gavin Newsom, who used to crow about a surplus, now is in a deficit. He says 27 billion. It seems to be more in the line of like 70 or maybe 80, according to the Legislative Analyst Office. Wow. So he's being forced to make cuts. And of course, where do you go? You can't stop spending money on homelessness. You can't stop spending money on climate change. You can't stop spending money on all these industrial complexes that you've built up for your supporters. You have to cut the jails when you already have a problem with crime. And so it makes no sense. They're also entertaining, which is so insane, a plan to give $400,000 in reparations to every Black Californian. They are still entertaining that idea. Meanwhile, we can't guarantee a safe community or a decent school. It's very, very odd.
Well, I think that the cuts to the jail system are particularly interesting in light of the fact that they have made explicit that part of their progressive agenda says they want to lower the prison population. Well, right. What better way to do it if you're cutting back the budget? You just can't afford to keep those people in prison. So yeah. I look at it all very cynically.
Well, and it's easy to do in California, but here's another story of hope. So we have one family who's doing good, even though they're suffering through an incredible loss right now. But the people of California have also just done something very good this week. Proposition 47 is one of the reasons that California is in the trouble that we're in. This was the piece of legislation that took a lot of felonies and made them into misdemeanors. This is the beauty that said you can steal $950 and it's just a misdemeanor. This is the one that said date rape is not a felony. I mean, so much for protecting women. Prop 47 was designed by Gavin Newsom, by George Gascon, the LA County District Attorney, and none other than the Vice President herself, Kamala Harris. And they tried to sell it to California as a Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act, which was anything but. And it really was the starting point where you saw this shift in even the ability of good DAs to actually prosecute crimes because of this law. So Californians have gotten together. They've had the guidance of some incredible sheriffs. In fact, Sheriff Bianco, who we talked about, Riverside County Sheriff, the DA in Riverside County, Mike Hestron, Todd Spitzer from Orange County, he's the DA there. They all came together and they have created an amendment to Prop 47 that's going to actually put in like almost a 3-strike system for people who are involving themselves in all of these thefts. And we got enough signatures. This thing is qualified for the ballot. It happened this week. It is polling extremely high with both Democrats and Republicans in California who have had enough. And we're going to be voting on it now in November to make a change to 47. Now, it's not going to be enough. It doesn't get rid of it entirely, but it does make changes to it. And already you can see the Democrats shifting. And in the state legislature this week, they've been bringing in bills that actually make it look like they're serious about tackling crime because they're trying now to sell to California in the next couple of months. They don't really need to do anything with 47 because the state legislature is taking care of everything when that couldn't be further from the truth. But well done for us organizing and making change when our electeds won't do it.
I think it's just incredible that they managed to collect 910,000 signatures. I mean, if you think about it, that is volunteers going around everywhere or putting things out online and getting 910,000 individuals to sign a petition. That's huge.
Yeah, it was a lot of work and a lot of organization and a lot of manpower. I mean, they were doing these drive-through signature events, which seemed to work. And I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast are in the Grassroots. They'd go out to like the Pond in Anaheim, which is something else now because, you know, there's always a corporate sponsorship, but the big stadium where the Ducks play, and they did drive-through signatures and they got local radio stations involved and they tried to drive people to sign and it worked. And so it can be done even in a state like California. At least we have this thing qualified and on the ballot. And it's actually written in a mostly straightforward way. Typically, one of the other dirty tricks is they try to change the title and summary or make a yes vote mean a no vote. This one's pretty straightforward and it's pretty popular, at least as of right now. So I'm excited about it. I think it can mean real change for us. And that's because of the hard work of the people. So it's a good inspirational story. Now, I showed you a story today in Politico that I thought was really interesting, kind of shifting gears a bit. Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House, is getting called out by Politico in a couple of headlines. One of them, Kevin McCarthy's expensive revenge tour is starting to raise doubts with the House GOP. The other, Tuesday's elections revealed a lot about GOP power, in parentheses, sorry, Kevin McCarthy. And basically what Politico is talking about here is that Kevin McCarthy, after he was ousted as Speaker of the House, went on this revenge tour. He's extremely powerful when it comes to fundraising. And he was able to use a lot of money, a lot of resources to try to take down some of his opponents or force them into resigning. One of them was George Santos. And say what you will, by the way, about George Santos. I'm not saying the guy's like a stellar individual, but I am saying we could have used his vote in a tight Congress right now where Republicans only are up by a few votes. Nancy Mace, who just won her election by, I think, 20 points. Kevin McCarthy spent a lot of money to run against her as well. And this was the story in races across the country. Republicans, instead of focusing on the Democrats, taking each other down. And this is the ultimate battle, I think, between grassroots and the establishment. And finally, I think we're seeing a turn where the grassroots were starting to win, Katie.
So my understanding of McCarthy's strategy is he's going after all the members of the Freedom Caucus. And so here in Virginia, where we're feeling it is he is going after Bob Good, who is the much beloved congressman who is now in his second term representing Virginia's 5th district. And Kevin McCarthy is going after him hard and pouring money into it. And I'm with you. Like, I just cannot believe this is how we are spending our precious resources as conservatives, if indeed he is conservative, to win this fight. I mean, I feel like we are in the fight for our lives against the Democrats, and Kevin McCarthy is on some kind of petty revenge tour. Makes me crazy.
It makes me sick is what it does, because you've had Kevin McCarthy who says we all need to come together and we all need to remember the real enemy, but yet he's not following his own rules and he's not following what he says. And this is what establishment Republicans miss. The American people we're awake to this stuff now. We realize that there is a huge problem within our own party and that it's not just everything that Republicans spit out there is good. We're questioning what's happening in the way that we're running ourselves because we've been losing. And the reason we're losing is because we're spending money and resources that we really need on ridiculous things like trying to go after candidates that might be so-called MAGA candidates or in the Freedom Caucus. I'll tell you about Kevin McCarthy, and it was actually cited in this article in Politico. A friend of mine is Congressman Mike Garcia. He represents California's 27th congressional district. which for the record is a Democrat plus 12 district.
Oh.
He wins, however, as a Republican. And when Mike Garcia was running against Katie Hill, it was back in, I think it was in 2020, I want to say, there had to be a special election. Taxpayers had to pay for a special election, all because Kevin McCarthy said Mike Garcia was too wild. He was too much of a MAGA candidate. He didn't want to support him. So in a race that Mike Garcia was in for months and had gotten all of this grassroots support. I mean, you would drive through his congressional district and you'd see women on street corners spinning Mike Garcia signs like they were being paid to bring someone to a new housing project or something. I mean, it was incredible to see how many people turned out for him so early on. And he was organized and he had the grassroots and he was making a splash. And McCarthy actually talked into, who's also a nice guy, Steve Knight, who was a former congressman, who was out of the race. He had lost to Katie Hill, so he was not in that election, and brought him in at the last minute into the primary to challenge Mike Garcia. Now, because of that, we eventually ended up having to have a special election for Mike Garcia. He ultimately ended up winning, but this not only cost the Republican Party the split that ensued because of that, but it also cost taxpayers in California to have a special election because McCarthy was tinkering with the system instead of just letting in the candidate that was already establishing himself and has gone on now to win several elections and is helping hold the slim Republican majority through California. I mean, it's insane.
Well, I hope that the lights that's being shed on this is going to put a damper on future activity. And plus the fact that the results are not turning out the way he wanted. And, shame on him. And I think he's getting his just desserts. The fact that he's spending millions of dollars on these campaigns that aren't succeeding. So I hope he just quietly fades away after this.
Yeah, me too. And I hope that I actually do believe that his failure to have an impact, even spending all of the money that he did in these races, he didn't win. Number one, you've got the changes at the RNC. Number two, I really feel like this is the moment where the grassroots, the piece of the party that drives the energy and the connection with the average American voter, I think we're shifting. I think we're seeing big changes, and it's about time. All right, we have another story for you. Just one more. Again, shifting gears. We're gear shifting all over the place today, Katie. But there was a hearing this week also that not a lot of people heard about. And props to our producer, Misty, who's awesome. And she said, did you guys hear about this? The Ways and Means Committee was doing a little digging into foreign funding on college campuses, foreign funded curriculum. This could be at least very problematic. And I think it's definitely worth investigating a bit. Katie, I know you found a story about a proposal about actually parental notification about just this on campus.
Yes, there was legislation proposed last Friday in Congress called the TRACE Act, Transparency in Reporting of Adversarial Contributions to Education. And what this is proposing is that parents would have to be informed if there's any foreign funding that's been used to purchase particular criteria. But I want to step back for just a second, because I think my understanding is what inspired this hearing today on the crisis on campus is the crazy protests that we've been seeing, right? It's very interesting. There has been one big study that came out just a few weeks ago that showed a lot of money coming and supporting those protests with ties to China. So there is I think he's an American. His name is Singham. He has this thing called the Singham Network. He made a lot of money in tech, but he's a radical progressive. And I think he made $750 million when he sold his company. But now he's got really strong ties to China. His money has been flowing in to help fund these protests. And I think what we all need to talk about more and wake up to is the degree to which countries like China, Iran, Russia, they're not fighting us militarily, right? Because they know they can't hold a candle to the United States militarily, but they can absolutely take advantage of our First Amendment, of our openness, to
open borders, by the way.
Open borders, absolutely. But also just the whole information space, our education space, to sow extraordinary discord. And that's a lot of what's happening. And I think what they have done on campuses is just particularly heinous. And I'm sorry, but I think our American universities have just become monuments to greed. I really have to say that. I think that the salaries that they are making are obscene. Senior administrators, the number of administrators that they're hiring compared to students is obscene. And what they are willing to do to compromise in order to accept foreign students and foreign funding is utterly shameful. So I am so grateful for the hearing today, and I hope we will just keep talking about this more and more and exposing it.
Yeah, we have to. I mean, because it's not slowing down. I think a lot of us thought, okay, summer vacation is here. These things are going to quiet down. No, Cal State LA just this week had a hostage situation, which it's amazing to me that it doesn't even get more attention than it does really locally. And that is that a group of protesters who were allowed to stay on campus for over a month, they were there for a month, this encampment. Can you imagine? I mean, bring on the showers. And then they decide to start moving towards the main building where the administration is housed. And they lock down the entire first floor. Well, the chancellor's office, everybody is up above them on like the 8th floor. They're stuck. They're now told to shelter in place because they're not allowed to leave. I think 12 faculty members were stuck above these people who weren't just there peacefully protesting, as we're told. They were breaking copy machines. They were pushing equipment and furniture outside to barricade themselves in. They were spray painting everything. My favorite is they spray painted genocide Joe Byron. Now, I don't know. Maybe that's China not knowing exactly who our president is. I don't know. Or maybe it's these people not knowing who our president. I don't know. But genocide Joe Byron was spray painted on the halls. I mean, it's so bizarre. And I think it is important to know that, yes, there are misguided young people in this country. And there are a lot of people who like to be part of that protest. But when you look at what is really dividing us, what's really destroying us, whether we talk about, and I can bring it all together, the DAs that are breaking down our cities because of the crime crisis, or these schools that are allowing this craziness and the craziness with curriculum to go on, it's all being funded by outside sources. In addition, I mean, these are threats from within our country, but it's also being funded to sow chaos from outside of our country. And we better wake up, because we are letting it slip away every single day.
And I just, I have to add one more piece to that, which is we're also seeing here in Virginia, and I think it's going on all around the country, is also the way foreign countries are pouring millions of dollars to shape our elections. Yeah. Here in Virginia, we've had a case of Chinese money being used to blanket certain portions of the population who are going to be inclined to vote Democrat with voter registration forms. Some people have received as many as 6 or 7 applications. So it's crazy. And I think we need to do a lot more to bring light to this and to talk about it and show our outrage and to fight back.
To be aware, to share the stories, because the mainstream media is not going to help, and to be engaged. Absolutely. That's what we do here. That's the whole point of the Happy Women podcast. And we thank you all for being with us. Don't forget to subscribe to Happy Women wherever you get your podcasts. You can get all the connections at the SalemPodcastNetwork.com. Just look for us, Happy Women. You should also get Katie's book. It's called Next Gen Marxism. Get it wherever you buy books, and follow her on her website, katiegorka.org. And on Facebook, just search Catherine Gorka. You can find me, Jennifer Horn Radio, at Facebook and Instagram, and you can find me on Truth and X at Jennifer Horn. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been another episode of the Happy Women podcast.